Welcome to the Sherpa Chalet on Mount Podcastia, where it's time for podcast picks with Jim the Podcast Sherpa. You'll get to hear about podcast recommendations for your podcast playlist, along with occasional interviews with other podcasters and video hosts. Now waiting for you is your host, Jim the Podcast Sherpa. He's just like you imagined. But don't worry, we'll make it up to you somehow.
Welcome to the Season 14 Wrap-Up mini-episode of Podcast Picks with Jim the Podcast Sherpa. It's where the Sherpa thanks everyone and provides a spoonful of Sherpa Samples. And of course, you know that if you've ever seen the Sherpa eat, it's a pretty large spoon.
Welcome to the Sherpa's Podcast Picks. It's the podcast about, podcasts. And now, coming to you from Mount Podcastia, here's your host, who wonders what's on your podcast playlist, Jim the Podcast Sherpa.
Hello there, rebels of the Sherpa-lution, and welcome to Podcast Picks with me, Jim the Podcast Sherpa, coming to you from Sherpa-lu Studios here in the Sherpa Chalet, high atop Mount Podcastia, where I overlook the millions and millions of podcasts that are out there. And if you've never heard this show before, well, welcome. But I'll tell you what you've missed. You've missed 13 seasons of me doing this. What happens is I've always made our seasons 25 episodes long, and then I do a mini episode for number 26. And being that this is the end of season 14, here is your mini episode for you, so I shan't be too long for you. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. And usually what we do here is we acknowledge some folks, and we do some Sherpa samples, and we let you know what's going on with the show. And there are some little things going on with the show that I do want to discuss. So I guess we will jump right into it. First of all, the first ones that I always like to thank are you, the listeners. I really appreciate you finding me on your podcast player app. And hopefully you are making a podcast playlist where you can hear some of the podcasts that we've talked about this season and maybe even finding some of your own too. If there are some that you've been checking out that I haven't spoken about, please, by all means, get back to me. I'm on social media at Sherpa-lution through Instagram or Threads or YouTube and TikTok. And you can also email me at jimthepodcastsherpa@gmail.com. Let me know what you're listening to. I'd be really fascinated to know. A special thanks to my listeners again, because I've noticed that I've really been getting bigger numbers these last few weeks. And I really appreciate that. Maybe, people are starting to check out my back catalog now that they're comfortable with the newer stuff. Or maybe people have just stumbled across this show, or somebody gave them a recommendation, which we hope. That's always nice. And really bigger numbers from what I usually get. And I really, really appreciate that. That is super. And I know that if I get actually a certain amount of downloads in the course of a month, as you well know, I'm on a new podcast platform called Acast. I like them, Acast. Thank you very much. And if I get a certain amount, I can actually put ads in the show. I wouldn't do that many ads. If the show could actually make some money, that's actually pretty good. And another way that you can help the show make money, which won't cost you a dime, apart from listening, is listening on open.video, which is kind of like YouTube. I get paid when there are a bunch of views on that page. And I always have the links for all of this stuff in the show notes in case you're curious and you want to maybe lend a helping hand. I wouldn't ask you for any money or anything like that, but by doing those things, that will actually help the show make money, and we can buy some neat stuff and maybe even take care of a little bit of business. I appreciate that. Also, the voiceover folks who've always been present in all of my episodes, and of course the Sherpa-lu studio players, they did a mini podcast too. I don't know if you checked it out, but they did a trivia podcast called Fake People, Real Trivia. I think they did 8 episodes. I'm trying to remember. And it was all of them. I produced it. A big production credit. Woohoo! It was really pretty cool. And people started checking that one out as well. So that's always there. And of course, one of my other side projects that I did a number of years ago called The Expert Factory, where I had some experts from different fields talk about different things. So those are really the 3 things that I've been working on. Well, the things that I've worked on and are working on. Maybe I'll do some more trivia episodes. I don't know. I'll see what happens. I know that by next year, I will probably have played all of my Saturday Sherpa Selects that I want to get on the YouTube channel and on the Open.video channel. So maybe I may delve into something else. I don't know. Well, we'll see where the mood strikes me. And you know that this season, we also launched True Crime Screening Room. And with that, I would like to offer a huge thank you to Wild Blue Press. Check out their website, wildbluepress.com. And I would say just about all of the true crime authors and even some of the non-true crime authors that I've interviewed this season have had their books published through there first. And you can get them there or on Amazon. But if you'd like to support Wild Blue Press, I'm sure they'd really appreciate it. There are some really great people, and they have hooked me up with some amazing guests. It has been a real treat doing that. I know people enjoy true crime, so I figured it was nice to do a little offshoot and kind of stick within my regular format and cover true crime. And I know you guys have responded really well to some of these episodes. Again, appreciate that very much. And I'd like to thank all the authors and folks who've appeared on that show, along with all the people who've been on the Sherpa Screening Room as well. Had some really good ones this year. Probably one of my favorites was the singer Kendall Wild. She's been on tour, probably as of this recording, with Postmodern Jukebox. And of course, she has a EP out called Higher. You should definitely check it out. She's got an amazing voice. They just launched a video on YouTube, Postmodern Jukebox, of her singing the Heart song Barracuda. And it is just unbelievable. And she sings it in the style of a James Bond song. So if you're on YouTube, and I'm sure some of you are, check that out. You will be blown away. It's just that simple. Let me talk about some of the podcasters who have been on the show, because this is a podcast about podcasts. And I didn't get the chance to speak to as many podcasters as I would have liked to. So at least we had the other shows to fall back on. But I'm going to talk about that in a second. But let's cover the ones that we did. We got to talk to Jeff Krentzman. He was the guy who had the grill cleaning business, and he hosts a hockey podcast called, I love this, Mind Your Pucking Business. We spoke once again to Darren Bruce, who had actually been on the show a while back, and he's back in action, so he wanted to promote his podcast as well. We got to talk to Mark Hartzman, who hosts two podcasts, Weird Historian and To the Hilt. That was a fun episode if you didn't hear that one. It was really fascinating. I really enjoyed chatting with him. And wow, I think that was it. And of course, we did a couple of episodes with some Sherpa samples, just like this one. It's an interesting thing about the podcast charts, but we're going to talk about that in a second when I get into the Sherpa samples. Yeah, so what I wanted to talk about was, the fact that I didn't get the chance to speak to as many podcasters. I've been looking high and low for people with podcasts. And, sometimes they say they want to do the show and then they don't show up. So there's really not much that I can do about that. Some of them are just kind of hard to reach, So at least it's really just going to be a mix, I think, from here on out of podcast picks. I will try and listen to more podcasts. There are things going on in my life right now that I cannot discuss. In about a year, I will have a conversation with you guys and let you know everything that was going on with my life, but just not right now. I'll explain when the time comes and you'll understand why I had to wait to talk to you about all of this stuff. It's nothing bad. Don't worry. I'm not dying or anything like that. But as far as I know, am I dying? Am I? I guess we'll find out. I had noticed a while back that podcaster Mark Maron, who hosts a podcast called WTF, is actually hanging up his mic. And I read that he was getting kind of disenchanted with the podcast world. And it's unusual. And I mean, I'm not trying to compare myself to Mark Maron at all. I mean, he's been in show business for a long time. He was a stand-up comedian for a long time before even doing his podcast. And now I know he's been getting into acting as well. So good for him. I'm really happy for him. I wish him congratulations. And he's got an incredible body of work. I wanted to talk about Mark Maron. And like I said, I'm not trying to compare myself to him. His shows were really all interviews, and he talked to people from all walks of life, really. And this is kind of what this show is morphing into, but I really want to kind of keep the thought of podcasts being out there too. So whenever I can talk to a podcaster, I will definitely try and fit them in my schedules. And I've actually said in my show description that, if you've got a podcast and you want to come on the show and promote it a little bit, let me check it out, and you can be a guest and we'll have some fun. I like to make my guests feel comfortable. I think you've kind of presumed that, and just have a really good time with them. And if you're a podcaster and you've got a show to promote, maybe that show will end up on somebody's podcast playlist. That's all we want to do here. That's our goal. Plain and simple. As I said, we've also got the other stuff going on as well, the Sherpa Screening Room and the True Crime Screening Room. That stuff is not going away anytime soon. Not with all the amazing guests that we've had this season. And hopefully going into season 15, we will get more. I try and record these things ahead of schedule, but it's not too far ahead of schedule. I used to have this humongous backlog, but I don't really seem to have that anymore. So sometimes when I say I don't know who's going to be on the show next week, I honestly don't know who's going to be on the show next week. That's how this works. Now that we've gotten all the thank yous out of the way, I believe we've handled all that. Yes, we have. Let's move on into some Sherpa Samples.
Now it's time for Sherpa Samples. Got a podcast for the Sherpa to sample? Let us know and we'll mention your name on the show.
And as promised, it is time for Sherpa Samples. This is where I get to take a look at some of the podcasts that are out on the podcast charts. And I said earlier that I wanted to make a little bit of a comment about the podcast charts. It's weird. I don't know if it's that I just got so ahead of myself during the course of the season by listening to so many podcasts, but I was looking at the top of the charts in like 3 different podcast players, and it really hasn't changed much. I've really discussed, I would say, 85 to 90% of the podcasts that are already out there that are on the top of the chart. So, of course, I go into other charts too to see what I can dig up. I figured I would start this list with 4 podcasts that were on Spotify. There was not only audio, but there was video to these too. So I was checking out the video that went along with them as well. The first podcast I checked out was called The AI Daily Brief, which was formerly called, I believe, The AI Breakdown, if I'm not mistaken. Let me just double check here. Yep, The AI Breakdown. Of course, it is a podcast about artificial intelligence and a lot of different aspects of it. It's a daily news show featuring that. And the episode I checked out was about how people are using AI. And some of them are using them to create trivia podcasts. Unseen is a true crime podcast. This one was kind of scary. It was about a young single mother who lived, I believe, in Georgia, and she had to work at a bar on the evening of the Super Bowl, and she had her 13-year-old son and her 4-year-old daughter watched by a babysitter while she was working, and the 13-year-old son sent the babysitter home and then ended up murdering the 4-year-old daughter. So you can imagine how horrific this is. And it is believed that he may have had a mental breakdown. Last Meals is hosted by a guy named Chef Josh, and he interviews people as to what would be their last meal on Earth. And the episode I definitely had to check out was his interview with Gordon Ramsay. And he said it was a feast because they actually did bring him all the food that he wanted to eat. And Gordon Ramsay's a pretty interesting guy. I really enjoyed the interview that they had, too. There was a lot that I learned about him that I really didn't know. And he's also very funny. Give that a lot of credit. I don't really watch any of his cooking shows, but I definitely give the man a lot of credit. And also there was something called Ladbible Entertainment, which I think they usually post stuff on social media, which I guess would make sense. And in this episode, they had 2 gentlemen having a competition, English food and American food. So those were the podcasts that I checked out on Spotify. But I did check out some other ones too. I've been looking for a new history podcast to check out, and I found one that I thought was pretty good. It's called A Twist of History. It is brought to you by Mr. Bolin, who does a lot of the spooky podcasts and even some of the medical mystery podcasts. And the episode that I checked out was about the Cuban Missile Crisis and the Russian who ended up preventing a nuclear holocaust. Sadly enough, at the beginning of the episode, they said this was going to be their last episode. So I've been a little late to the party with that one. The Red Treehouse is a collection of scary stories. It is hosted by a guy named Will Soto. These are true stories. The episode that I checked out had to do with the death of a woman named Elisa Lamb. This was really weird. The video shows the woman going into an elevator and then having some sort of an episode, but then she's like later discovered in a water tank on the roof of the hotel that she was staying in, and they don't really know how she got there. They don't know if she could have possibly killed herself or if someone actually murdered her. It was a really disturbing story. Whew. Conspiracy theories, well, I guess you can figure out what that one has to do with. If you are a fan of conspiracy theories, this was pretty good. Very straightforward, not really overly biased, just kind of presents a lot of different arguments on different cases. I listened to the episode about the explosion of Flight TWA 800 over the South Shore of Long Island. Juicy Scoop with Heather McDonald. Heather McDonald, I guess, is an actress and a comedian. I'd never really heard of her. Supposedly she was known for, when she was doing stand-up, collapsing on stage. I don't know if it had to do with something with COVID or something like that. But I don't know. You know, they said that she died, but she really didn't die. It was unusual. But usually she talks about a lot of pop culture and gossip. The episode that I checked out, though, she was talking to a doctor who was on TikTok, Dr. Erin Nance, about misdiagnoses and a lot of health things in this episode. 13 Minutes presents The Space Shuttle. That is brought to you by the BBC. They've done a series about the different segments of space travel, and obviously this one having to do with the launch of the space shuttle and all of the behind-the-scenes drama that went on with it. But I know they dedicate different seasons to different space missions. So it's pretty interesting stuff. Two Hot Takes is hosted by a lady named Morgan Absher. I guess she's big on social media. I've never really heard of her. I think she's big on Instagram, or I'm not sure. And every week she sits with a different co-host and they discuss things on Reddit. They have discussions about relationships and love and sex and all that other stuff. Some of the subjects that were brought up were really kind of, it's kind of hard to believe that people bring these things up on Reddit, but it's Reddit. So, I guess we can expect that. And lastly, another true crime case brought to you by the CBC called Dirtbag Climber. And it is about the discovery of a man in a burnt-out vehicle who turned out to be a rock climber that was known as Jesse James. And it kind of goes into who he was and who would have wanted to have him killed. So there you have it. 11 podcasts that maybe you might want to check out and add to your podcast playlist. And of course, since we are coming to the end of season 14, I guess we will come to the end of this and to the beginning of the outro.
It looks like the Sherpa is no longer locked in the bathroom at the Sherpa Chalet, so we can finally get back to the show.
That'll do it for our Season 14 wrap-up. We hope to see you next week. And if you are new to the show, please listen and subscribe so you'll always hear all the new episodes when they come out, which is normally on a Wednesday. And of course, on Saturdays, we have our Sherpa Selects, where we will be bringing to you some of my favorite episodes from the first 7 seasons. I believe we are on Season 5, approaching the end of it right now. We're still playing shows from 2020, believe it or not. They're a busy guy in 2020, apparently, amongst all that COVID stuff. So you can hear us on Wednesdays and on Saturdays. For Sherpa Selects, you can follow us on Sherpa-lu on Instagram, Threads, TikTok, and of course our YouTube channel, which is at Sherpa-lu 5000, and also where you can support our show on open.video. And speaking of podcast apps, I just wanted to let you know we are back on iHeart, and they were very nice in helping correct the problem. So they're all there in case you like listening to iHeartRadio. You can hear our podcast there as well. Also, before I let you go, we have 2 link pages. If you want to find out more about the show, you can find out about us on Linktree or chirp.me, and you just look under Sherpa-lu on those websites. The links are right there in the show notes, so I've made it nice and easy for you. So on the topic of nice and easy, I guess that will do it for me, and I guess we will be back with the Season 15 premiere, unless I decide to throw in a Sherpa Select episode, but it will be coming, and hopefully on Season 15, I am planning to have one of the people that are on my podcast playlist make an appearance on the show, and I think you guys will enjoy this interview. I'm keeping my fingers crossed. That should be coming up within about a month or so, I'm guessing. But until then, I'll leave you with that. And I say to you, viva the Sherpa-lution.
Thanks for listening to the Sherpa's Podcast Picks. The podcast is now over. Please disperse and tell everyone about us. As long as they don't put us back in jail. Viva la Sherpa-lution!